So a quick introduction. So I'm Peter Jones, and this is Andreas Dilger.
Right, Andreas Dilger.
And we are two of the founders of the Lustre Collective. And so the Lustre Collective is a little unconventional as startups go. Usually a startup, you've got an idea, you're trying to convince people that it's a good idea. No one's, maybe people are skeptical, it takes some convincing. So we're sort of a bit unconventional insofar as Lustre has existed for a long time. People know they like it, and then we have an added complication that people can use it for free. So we'll elaborate a bit as to why we're doing what we're doing. But first of all, just to bring you up to speed about Lustre, because again, that is something that people, there is some confusion about Lustre and its status and things. So we'll just give a bit of backstory there. So, and then we'll go on to the TLC specific part. So Lustre has been around for about 25 years. Andreas has been around all of that time, myself for about 20 of it. It came from a sort of DOE lab background in the States. It was funded with a view to try and get a breakdown the sort of monopoly situation with IBM's GPFS. Pretty early on, Lustre got a good reputation as being very fast, scratch file system. People liked it being open source. Maybe didn't have the best reputation for stability in early days, but people took the attitude that if it happened way faster, if you just restart and try again, it would work the next time. That was good enough in many cases for sort of scientific research workloads. And then as things have moved on over the years, so probably about 10 years or so, we first started seeing signs in our annual survey of AI and machine learning popping up as well, different, normally in conjunction with different kinds of research disciplines. And then that really picked up pace, certainly 5-7 years ago, much more so, and we've got to the point now where you have major cloud vendors all have a first-party service, which is a managed service based on Lustre in the space. And that's because of what Lustre is very good at, aligns well with what's needed to do large amounts of data crunching for AI machine learning workloads. So and then I see, I think it's like an interesting observation of over this period that you see, early adopters, back 20 years ago who had a Lustre solution for on-prem operating in a HPC markets. Usually they have some brand name that obfuscates that Lustre's involved. So if you think of, Fujitsu's FEFS, Cray, with Cluster Store, DDN with Exascaler, you're relying on the brand you trust of the company to give it credibility to the solution. Whereas the newer sort of hyperscalers with their managed Lustre solutions, they have Lustre named as part of it because it's established that people understand that they want Lustre. So, and yes, we today have see that the two US-based exascale systems. The first two were both using Lustre. Very large, prominent AI systems, like the one at XAI and ones at NVIDIA, also using Lustre today. So one of the main reasons I think that Lustre has endured and been so consistently widely used, we have data going back as far as SC10 of the top 500 lists, and pretty consistently it's between 60%, even the low 70s of that top 100 of that list are using Lustre. And it's not all the same vendor. It's not something where somebody has a monopoly or a very successful solution for a while. It's because it's GPL version 2, it's a permissive open source license. People have the ability to take it and adjust it and adjust it for their specific needs. They're not. And then for a consumer, that sort of investment seems attractive because there's a flexibility, even if things change with their relationship with the particular vendor they're dealing with over time, or they still have, a path forward with that investment they've already made. So, do you want to step over and we're going to do a bit of switching back and forth. But, I will just say before I hand over to Andreas, this comment here from, this is from Steve Crusan and Brock Johnson from Hudson River Trading. So Hudson River Trading is a high frequency stock trading company, and Steve and Brock are both, seasoned HPC storage admins, and who now work for HRT. And this quote was from a presentation that they gave at the Lustre User Group at Stanford last April. And basically they said, they sort of look at absolutely everything on the market, and they keep always, to make sure they're using the best for their purposes. They're not tied to any particular technology. But they find that, despite marketing claims that might come from, more contemporary, recent sort of technologies that are being heavily marketed, they find that Lustre, they can always return to Lustre because it consistently just works. Like however pathological the workload is, other technologies might just die, but they can always just put those things onto Lustre. It may not always run the fastest if it's how it's written, but it works. So,
link at the bottom is to Steve's entire
right.
presentation
with the video.
With the video, if you want to watch it.
Right.
All right. So in terms of technology, Lustre has been at the leading edge for many years, and that's why one of the reasons why it's so widely adopted. Speeds and feeds, we're into terabytes a second for aggregate bandwidth. Hundreds of petabytes of storage, and I joke that the scaling limitations for Lustre are generally the bank account of the people deploying it, rather than any kind of physical limitation on the number of servers or the capacity of the performance. And even though Lustre was originally designed and developed for HDD based storage, some competitors will say, oh, it's old fashioned that way. But if you look at QLC technology today, large IOs, aggregate IOs, you're actually leveraging the underlying storage optimally. And we tested with QLC, and we don't have to do any wear leveling or anything, because we actually utilize the storage very efficiently.
And every data center still has plenty of physical hard disks.
Yes,
tons.
Yeah, for sure. And even with the flash supply crunch today, being able to balance that, right? And I'll talk a little bit about storage management later. But on the flip side, Lustre was developed when 2 cores was the common thing, and so we're very efficient in terms of CPU usage. A lot of the modern flash-based file systems, they're doing busy waiting, to receive packets from the network, and that pins, many cores on a single system, and so that's very inefficient in terms of power and utilization of those nodes. As well, we have a very flexible configuration. We can use any kind of block storage underneath, drives, flash, even non-volatile memory, and we can use the storage inside compute nodes as a persistent cache. So workloads like machine learning, where you're training repeatedly from the same data, we can cache data onto the local storage. And so that provides us with a number of different advantages. In terms of protocol support, Lustre is POSIX compliant itself, even though it's distributed across tens of thousands of nodes. And we can re-export with NFS, S3, Samba, in parallel configurations. And one of the interesting areas that's come about recently is, we worked hard to aggregate all of this storage into one, coherent file system, but now users want to subdivide it into virtualized environments for multi-tenancy and things. So we've done a lot of work to virtualize the storage and the management, isolate different groups of users for security or for capacity limitations and things like that.
Excuse me,
yeah.
Why do you do that actually? It's because now you are addressing AI, and AI you have many different
there's cloud vendors, the CSPs, they buy a gigantic GPU cluster, thousands of GPUs, and then they want to lease it out in a cloud manner. And so they want to subdivide, the aggregate storage rather than configuring separate storage, because then you have to physically isolate, different parts of the storage hardware. So instead they can create one large file system, and then they virtually isolate, and then they can separate performance, capacity, users, and then we virtualize the IDs and the space on the back end so that it can be much more flexible than just subdividing the hardware. Yeah.
So you are open source, you mentioned Samba for SMB. Does
Yeah.
it mean for NFS you use Ganesha?
Yes, and we can do either kernel-based NFS3 export or Ganesha. It depends on who's doing it.
And for S3?
For S3 MinIO, or
Okay.
there's other proprietary versions. Quite a few different options for S3 exporting, but MinIO works for sure. And so this slide kind of represents, essentially a typical, cluster. We have metadata targets, as you would imagine, manage namespace, permission access controls. And they're, capacity flexible into the hundreds. Object storage targets of different types, flash and disk. We can also have, high performance storage targets directly connected to exotic high-speed networks like Cray and Bull. Amazon has a custom network now. And so we can manage all of these. And one of the nice things about Lustre is that the storage configuration is very flexible, that the files can live anywhere, and we don't have to stage them from disk onto flash, onto the compute nodes. The clients can actually access it directly no matter where it is. And so it's not really peering, but multi-storage capable. We can also do storage inside the compute nodes, like typical DGXs, have 8 NVMe cards, and often they're just space heaters, right? Because managing that manually is a lot of work, but we can transparently cache into there, and it's cache coherent, as you'd expect with the POSIX file system. Protocol export nodes for different different file serving protocols, but also access into archive, offline storage, S3, tape, right? And there are some configurations that have WAN access directly into the storage from a central location. Newer features include compression and erasure coding for the storage, so that it's redundant. I mean, the typical configuration today is redundancy at the storage server level, but we're working on the erasure coding so that we can have redundancy up at the software level.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So I see there will be new features, but at the moment, I don't know if you agree, but a lot of people in the storage are talking about PNFS as an alternative of Lustre.
Yeah.
So if you accept, could you highlight the difference, why Lustre is really better than PNFS? Because for us it's a bit confusing.
Yeah, so I mean, PNFS is still at its heart a one-to-one configuration. So PNFS will allow a metadata server to direct the data storage to other data servers, right? But it's not truly parallel in the sense that you can't have parallel I/O on a single file. You can't, it's not cache coherent. You have to have either separate writers or, it does the flush on close, right? And so it's not, you can't have multiple reader writers accessing a single file at a time. You can't, Lustre can do parallel directories. So we have one directory that's actually distributed across multiple metadata servers. And,
for instance, when a server wants to read, when several servers want to read the same data, they access the same node, or they access different node?
In both cases, in both Lustre and in PNFS, the data is resident on one node. But we can split a file and maintain coherency for that file, regardless of offsets and things like that, across multiple nodes, right?
Okay.
And so the scaling is better that way. We can even do flash on different parts of a file versus disk, and distribute even within a single file across multiple servers of different types.
So
Right.
the client is able to stripe the file
Yes.
across multiple OST? Or?
Yeah, and that's accessible to the users. Not many users do that, but the flexibility is there. And so we do things like, having the rights go to one set of high performance servers, and then transparently in the background, it can be migrated off to other servers based on the capacity of these and the age of the files. And then if there's cache hits, obviously you prefer to get it from the high performance servers, but if it's gone to the disks, if there's 2 copies, we can do mirroring today, not erasure coding, but we can do mirroring, and so it would prefer the high performance read, but if there's no high performance copy, it can read from the lower performance copy. And we could even do things like, the first 24 megabytes of the file are on flash, the rest of this big file, so if you have indexes and things like that, that can go in within a single directory. We can distribute the storage anyway.
But you confirm you can do file striping at the client level, because not
Oh,
all
yes.
parallel file system can do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it can go up to 2,000 servers wide, so it's pretty
So it
scalable.
creates an issue, because when it's very horizontal,
Yeah,
as you don't support erasure coding, but mirroring,
yeah.
you have to find a similar, let's say, distribution.
It's the layouts are unique per file, so we don't have an algorithmic distribution, right? So each file can actually specify exactly the where the data is located. But unlike something like Ceph, where each 32 megabytes is chunked apart, we have actually a relatively simple layout. So the files, when the client opens the file, it knows everything about where it's located. It doesn't need to go to the metadata server for every I/O, right? And so that's one of the reasons why Lustre scales very well, is because the OSTs abstract all of the allocation information. So once a client knows, okay, the data is striped across these 4 OSTs, it doesn't need to ask them every time, where's this block, where's that block? And GPFS and all of those kind of file systems still have like block mapping up at the client level, but we only have object mapping. And so all of the internals of the storage, these might be ZFS or they might be LDiskFS. The underlying details are abstracted from the clients, right? And so it gives us very good scalability. We don't have a high touch during reads and writes on the file.
We'll switch again.
Okay.
All right, so finally we get on to talking about our company. So we're a very new company. We're just about 2 months old. We literally incorporated the company on the Friday and then flew to supercomputing on the Sunday. So we already had obligations on the actual program at supercomputing, and we although we weren't ready in many regards we wanted to sort of take the opportunity to connect with people who we thought would be interested to work with us about our development. And so our primary mission is to focus on Lustre and to ensure that Lustre remains relevant in the decades ahead. And we think that the best way to do that is through collaborative open source development. So I say a bit more about that a bit later, but first of all, as the founders of the company, there's Andreas and myself, and also Colin Faber. All of us are veterans of cluster file systems, the original Lustre startup, and we've all worked for a number of different companies over the years, all companies who've been focused on Lustre. So myself, I've been managing Lustre development teams through all those various companies, or from startups up to Fortune 500 companies. And I've also been in a role where I'm the main contact point to very large customers or partners we're working with who are launching Lustre solutions. So I think that's given me a really good insight into what people need in the Lustre community, what the approach people will have taken that ends up being successful or less successful. Andreas, he would be too modest to tell you this, but he is, as well as being very respected for his technical knowledge, he's also very appreciated for his generosity with his time, that he's willing to patiently go through in a lot of detail with people who have questions. So it's not unusual on the Lustre mailing list to see people write, hi Andreas, when they sort of send a letter, to the mailing list. And it's one of those things that you take it as normal at the time, and then I wish I had some record of that. We had a little flurry where we, Cluster File Systems was acquired by Sun, and Sun was acquired by Oracle. I think at one point, CFS, had changed their domain name from ClusterFS to CFS. And so the Lustre mailing lists were hosted on a site at the time which had in the right-hand bar, when you went on the archive, the top 10 contributors of all time. And at one point, Andreas was 5 of those 10 with different email addresses. So it's just like, it's a standing joke even when he's on vacation officially. He stops doing all his day job, but still he replies to the Lustre mailing lists when he gets some good Wi-Fi. And Colin, again, he's not here, but he's very integral to what we're doing. He's had a wealth of experience across different all different things with Lustre solutions over the years. He's was telling me an anecdote earlier this week about when they were introducing a new Lustre appliance, and it was at a very prestigious and ancient university in the UK. I won't name the name, but you can probably hazard a guess. And the trouble they had getting the cabinets through these 12th century Gothic stone arches that they needed to go through to get the the boxes into the data center. So yeah, he's done all that, but also actually writing code and doing training and more recently managing teams of Lustre developers as well. And so, this graphic here is a pie chart. This is the Lustre 2.17 community release that came out just very late last year, right at the end of December. And so this is sort of reflecting that basically all of it, pretty much all of last year, the number of commits altogether, changes that went in for which organization they're affiliated to. So we do register only just because we only existed for a few weeks of that development cycle, but of course with this year's the release that's being actively worked now, we expect to have a much more prominent role.
Both comes from one cloud.
Yeah, there's a long history of Lustre. I mean, it started at Cluster File Systems. That was in 2001. Sun acquired that. Oracle acquired Sun, but wasn't interested in HPC at all. And then we split off and formed Wham Cloud, which was a Lustre-specific startup.
Yeah.
And then Intel acquired
Yes,
Wham
why
Cloud.
Intel? My question is, why Intel?
Well, Intel was because they had aspirations to be a leading HPC vendor to compete with Cray,
Okay.
right? And so they wanted a whole ecosystem around, HPC in terms of distribution, file system, everything, right? And so they thought it in a similar sense to NVIDIA does today with their software offerings, that having a flexible software ecosystem would help, lift the Intel compute.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
in the-
strange because they finally gave up
Yes.
and they restart or participate to the DAOS project. linked to
Well, so
Octane, etc.
DAOS
Yeah.
was essentially
Yeah.
like a fork of the developers, the Lustre developers.
Well, yeah, it
right?
was basically the initial research project for DAOS was at the Wham Cloud startup.
Yeah.
So when Intel bought the Wham Cloud startup, they got both the Lustre team and the DAOS.
I mean,
Team
essentially
responsible.
DAOS was a project. How do we sell more Optane, right?
Yeah.
That was the core essence of,
Right.
what can we do to make people want to buy a lot of it? And because, Intel exited the Optane market, right? That leaves DAOS
Yeah.
a little bit stranded.
So,
And
you
now
know,
HP
well, so then,
Yeah.
so
took
then.
the lead on this.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
DDN acquired the WAM cloud assets out of Intel,
Yeah,
in order to, you know, progress Lustre at DDN,
right.
right?
So, but anyway, that's sort of, I was going to get into some of that here. You can see there's a variety of different organizations who contribute. You know, the large ones are prominent, and there's, you know, some who are just smaller in this release. But there's a mix of, you know, people who have Lustre solutions, whether that's sort of on-prem, sort of, or traditional HPC type solutions, or cloud vendors as well, like AWS has been pretty prominent with their Lustre solution for a number of years. And you do see, you know, other cloud vendors sort of, you know, smaller number of contributions, but they are getting increasingly more active. And then, so this is one of the things that we feel creates an opportunity that, oh, and also research institutes, of course, not diminishing their role, like CEA at Livermore, for example, long term, and Oak Ridge, of course, very, very prominent. So, you know, there can be sort of some complexities with, you know, if the sort of main engineering activity is from a certain organizations, there can be sort of competitive dynamics a little bit at play that can maybe interfere with the sort of free collaboration. So, you know, even, you know, we were at Intel, and most organizations were comfortable working with Intel, but for example, you know, at the time, you know, ARM were interested in having a Lustre solution, but they were uncomfortable. They wouldn't talk to us because we were employed by Intel. And similarly, you know, we heard at the time, you know, Mellanox, prior to being acquired by NVIDIA, were, you know, at the time reluctant to, you know, they had been engaged with the Lustre community, but then at the time Intel was promoting on the path, and so they were disinclined. They were kind of wary of anyone with an Intel badge, right? So we, you know, we'd always tried to maintain our sort of ethos of being open source and willing to work with everyone, but you can't affect people's, you know, the badge you wear does make a difference in terms of how willing people are to sort of feel comfortable with that. So, yes, and the other thing that we really want to stress here is we really feel that, you know, this showcases, like the Linux itself, right? That it's, you know, despite, you know, many of these organizations making very significant investments in the Lustre technology, everyone is still getting more out than they put in by working with open source. So that's really one of the other sort of real benefits of like a permissive open source sort of license around something. So, yeah, so our vision with this is that, you know, we can play a sort of neutral ground where we can work with all of these different classes of entity, and, you know, nobody is obliged to have to work with us. It's the onus is on us to identify ways of providing value to people, and I'll get onto that a bit more, the business side of it, but, you know, we're still happy to work with people and collaborate with them on a purely technical sense, but if there are business opportunities, you know, we still have costs and hope to, you know, we need to, you know, have business to cover our costs. So we have the kind of activities we've identified initially, and again, we're sort of continuing to talk and listen, and if other things come up that we hadn't already identified, we'll happily, you know, examine our, you know, how we can adjust to meet the needs of the market, as it were. But definitely sort of not, you know, things around knowledge transfer, giving expertise to people who are doing, you know, launching a Lustre solution. It can really, you know, a little bit of expert steering in the right direction can save huge amounts of time in your go-to-market. So that can be, you know, really a good investment for a company who's looking at launching a Lustre solution. One of the things we've heard repeatedly since that people who were, you know, maybe selling more commodity storage or wanted to have a Lustre solution, found that there was no option for them, or no sort of viable, you know, competitively priced option for them to be able to get support from developers for Lustre when there was a very serious problem. Like most of the time it's very stable, it just works, but still there can be, perhaps there's even some external event like a power outage that leaves the file system in a questionable state. How do you safely make sure you get out of that with your data intact? So that's one of the things that we're, basically all of these things are things that we've had at least some conversation with some party who's expressed an interest right up to actually going forward with a contract. Feature development, people want to make sure they prioritize getting a feature that they're very, they know will make a big difference to their solution. Just making sure they get the best performance optimization, best performance numbers from their storage. Again, having done that with a lot of different solutions over the years, our team has a lot of expertise here. And then even just basic installation, moving data across, those kind of things are things that we'd be willing to take on.
So I missed probably one point. The initial reason why you need to create this, was it some decision at DDN?
No. I mean, I appreciate that there's some sort of, people are speculating that there might be something like this, but really there's no issue with DDN per se, but it's more the thing that, DDN as a storage vendor, obviously the priority is on its portfolio and maximizing, the returns for the shareholders, and basically we feel like that Lustre, somebody needs to be independent looking at the overall Lustre technology and what's needed for the core Lustre, not just it being a component in someone's broader portfolio, right? That will just mean different kinds of decisions. So as Andreas is going to go on the next slide, like our approach is not to sort of disrupt or displace. There's already lots of development that was already planned and in flight, remaining in flight at those organizations that we showed earlier on. Our approach will be to sort of supplement that. So we'll help with efforts with reviewing code, giving input, and we'll also be looking at what would be gaps overall that over time we think that the core Lustre technology will need. So we'll be adding we're onboarding new developers. We will be putting those to work on what we see as being the long-term gaps that would exist if we didn't.
Yeah, I ask this because the Exascaler install base is pretty huge.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
they also introduce Infinia.
Yes.
That can create also some, let's say desire to, because as you said a few minutes ago, you said, sometimes people say we are not a modern solution.
Right.
Yeah.
And some people say, okay, for modern challenges, I need a modern solution.
Right.
But you need an experienced one, a proven one.
Right. It's funny how no one says that about Linux, right? It's just,
Linux is older, but
Yeah.
it's not going away. I mean, I think it's the next slide
Here's the
already
next
is
slide.
talking
That's
about
why you need
some of this.
good marketing, right? To
Yeah.
teach people that, hey,
Yeah, and so one of the goals of TLC is that we're focused only on Lustre, right? And so we want to make sure that the revenue that we get is reinvested in Lustre innovation and in the developers who are working on that. We also want to make sure that we're bringing in new people, right? Not just to have continuity in terms of Lustre development, but also to get new ideas, modernize the deployment stack to work with new technologies, right? So all of that is important to us, and we don't want to be dividing our efforts between multiple technologies, right? And so I think that's one of the core reasons why TLC was founded. And so you know, in that vein, I mean, there's a large number of new features. 2.18 is actually going to be quite an interesting Lustre release.
So you can be seen as the authority to manage or control Lustre, because there is also OpenSFS, there is different other.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
OpenSFS is mainly an advocacy group, right? They don't do any development or management of the code itself, right? It's more a grouping of you know, like-minded organizations.
So
right?
before you, no, there wasn't any entity.
Right. Well,
Correct, yeah, I mean, in the sense that, you know, each of the individual organizations developing Lustre, you know, had a, you know, they wanted to enhance functionality for their own purposes, but, you know, we had sort of inherited the, you know, the centralized, you know, management of the development process through WAM Cloud and into DDN, right? And so, you know, we felt that, you know, having an external organization, you know, we
Yeah.
don't want to compete with other people. We want to grow the size of the Lustre community so that more contributors, more growth can actually help everybody, right? Rather than, you know, we're not competing with other people.
Yeah, I would say, and I like rewinding a bit, like I'm actively involved in leadership roles in both the Lustre community organizations. I'm one of the leads of the Lustre working group, which I have been for over 10 years. So that's the group that is all the different development organizations where all the collaboration and exchanges happen for the coordination for the community releases of Lustre. And I'm also a director of the Administrative Council for EOFS, the European Open File System Organization. Right, so I'm very supportive of the community. They do, you know, it's really great what they do, but it's not, I think what Andrea is trying to say, they're not necessarily right into the architecture of the technology. It's more, you know, like an advocacy.
Yeah, they're a conduit for communication, right, and organizing events
Right.
and things like that, right? But the OpenSFS and EOFS don't steer the technology, right?
So-
And I think the other thing I want to just catch was you said the word control, and I'd say we're more looking to influence the control, right?
Can we say that TLC is the new OneCloud or OneCloud V2 or?
It
No?
would be V3, but
Yeah, but, you know, a
Yes.
new iteration of.
Right.
potentially, yes.
So I think there's definitely a lot of similarities between the sort of the way that WAM Cloud operated, its principles of how it would work with the open source community. That is the same. The difference is with our WAM Cloud at the time was it was VC funded. And so that did mean when Intel was interested that the VCs wanted to cash in and get the return on their investment. And of course, you know, lots of great work happened at Intel. I enjoyed my time there, but it did, you know, create some other complications having a single, you know, commercial entity owning so much of the team and the technology.
If you look at your roadmap,
Yeah.
4.18, there are several new features. And behind that feature is a company that requests that feature.
No, that's the company that's developing. the
They
feature.
are developing
Yeah,
it, but
yeah.
you're managing it.
No,
I mean, we're going to be like, so this roadmap, these features have already been started development, you know, in the 2.17
Yeah.
development cycle. These ones had started being development, and now they're going to be landing in over the next year, right? And so there's a number of features, and the listed organizations are the ones that are actively developing that. And I mean, we're providing, you know, during this time frame, I mean, I do a lot of the code review and provide technical guidance on questions to all comers, right? In the future releases, you know, TLC will be taking a larger role in developing
Okay.
new features, right? But the roadmap for the 2.18 release, we will be providing some development support and, some smaller, not headline features in that release. But, we will be taking a larger role in releases going
And I mean,
forward.
even this list is not exhaustive. Like, we do know that there's development happening at CA and Google that's not reflecting this list yet. We will add to that as we get more details.
Yeah, but this is just the
Yeah.
marquee features,
Yeah.
right? I mean, erasure coding is one of the biggest ones because that provides redundancy up at the client level, right? And so that you can withstand, failures of whole servers or racks, transparently without even the applications noticing, right? And so, that provides, both data redundancy and availability. I mean, another big feature is the trash can undelete. So that'll be a functionality similar, to everybody's laptop, right? Where you can, users can recover their files without having to deal with administrators or tape backups or anything like that.
Unfortunately,
Right.
we have had a couple of incidents over the years where customers have discovered quite how quickly Lustre can delete files.
Yeah, if they had a
Some-
rogue script or something like that, right?
A star in the wrong place or something.
Yeah, and so, other features, we're not gonna go into all of the details, but needless to say, there's quite a number of big features, and there's a growing cast of organizations that are contributing, right?
Yeah. Oh, actually, before we move on, sorry, Andres, but I did want to just close on Philippe's point. So I was drawing the parallel between WAM Cloud and TLC. So while the principles and the way we operate with the community is very similar to WAM Cloud, the difference is in the ownership. So we're not seeking VC backing. We'll have the engineering team will retain the control of the organization. So we're not looking to sort of sell or IPO or anything. We're looking for this to be ongoing, more akin to a foundation. This is an ongoing concern that we want to have. So that was with us being the rattle at the beginning, I kind of skipped over that, but the name TLC was actually very deliberate. Of course, a bit of geek humor with the nod to TLC Flash, but also thinking of TLC like a bit of being able to give Lustre a bit of extra TLC. And then the word collective is very specific because the people that we're recruiting, we want people who are really engaged and believe in the mission of Lustre as an open source technology, and hopefully also have the next generation of younger developers as well.
Yeah. I mean, going forward, continuing on the roadmap a little bit. I mean, some of the larger features that have been, in the waiting in the wings for more attention include getting rid of the delays in terms of server failover, right, which can be a bit slower. Metadata redundancy up at the file system level rather than down at the block level, and a feature that's actually already had a lot of work done on it, but it just needs a landing window into a release, is the metadata write-back cache, which allows completely asynchronous operations file create and permissions and everything to work without any kind of server interaction. So you can, we saw in that testing almost 100 times speed up with certain types of workloads that are, working on a single directory per client. And so recently we've been doing one major feature release every year, and so we're targeting Q4 2018 for that list of features, and our 2.19 features will solidify over the coming years. We'll have a new roadmap presentation at the Lustre user group in April, I think.
Yeah. So the Lustre user group is usually March, April, May kind of timeframe, spring basically every year in the US, and it's this year it's the last week of April in Indianapolis. Usually, OpenSFS have a member organization, be the hosting organization. So some years ago it was at Indiana University Bloomington campus, and this time it's at the downtown sort of Indianapolis campus. So.
And I think you're up for
Oh
this
yes, right. So. Well, you were going to talk about sort of some of the high-level ideas. These are the sort of areas we've identified that we expect to, will need some attention, and we'll have more of the specifics, at the in April. But unless you've got some initial big ideas, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I'll stay over here, I guess. I mean, in terms of what users are asking for, right? For traditional HPC workloads, which were more batch focused, right? Having a server level failover was sufficient because, if your batch job takes a day or a day and 5 minutes, people are not going to notice. In interactive workloads like Lustre, I mean, for AI training, the batch mode is still sufficient, but it's getting increasingly used in inference workloads, right? Because it's, again, provides the best bang for your buck in terms of GPU hardware and throughput. So for inference workloads, people don't want to wait, for a server failover 5 minutes for their tab completion to work on their code, right? And so we have to have up-level the resilience more into the client, right? And so we're working on improving the availability, working into cloud environments where you don't have redundancy at the block level anymore, right? And provide all of the resiliency up at the file system level, or multi-tiered. For very large file systems, you probably want multi-tiered resilience, right? Double level RAID. And
what about snapshotting? Because it creates a nightmare due to the widely distributed environment. If we need to snapshot, wow, how do you synchronize?
Yeah, I mean, we can do so at the top level we can do snapshotting in Lustre with ZFS backends, and actually we don't have to have strictly synchronized snapshots across all of the storage targets, but in fact, the main use for snapshots is file recovery, right? And that's why we're working on the trash can feature, because the architecture of the way that Lustre deletes files is actually a two-stage process. And we already had this concept of moving files into a holding directory so that they can disappear from the namespace before we delete the data. And
But
so
it's more at the file level.
Yeah, and so
or directory level.
no, file level,
File
right?
level.
And so the nice thing with the trash can is you can have different lifespans for each file if you want, by policy, user group, by tenancy and things like that. And snapshots actually don't work very well in that regard because it's a global policy, and you have to retain all of the data. And because file lifetimes in large file systems like this, might be, you need months of retention, or you need hours of retention for checkpoints. And so having a global snapshot is actually not the ideal way to do it. We essentially have, per files, no, I wouldn't call them per file snapshots, but we can undelete, and users can do that themselves.
Another
Right.
question regarding file access with NFS, NSMB. You use a sort of gateway in order to re-export.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. I
so-
mean, but the gateway can run on the server if you
Yeah,
want,
yeah.
right? So it's in that respect, it can be as close or far as you want, right? We can use Lustre protocol, either have a client mounted on the server node and re-export via NFS,
Yeah.
or it can be on an external node, which is the typical one to provide isolation of the workload. Or people can use, I mean, Lustre is very efficient over the WAN. In cases you could have an NFS on the far end, right?
What about integrity or locking in that case? Or parallel access, meaning someone access NFS and someone access directly with Lustre?
I mean, there are mechanisms in NFS so it can request locking from the underlying file system, right? And so, I mean, NFS itself is never going to be wholly coherent, even if you just have one server, right? So within the limitations of NFS, we can be consistent. Obviously using Lustre native protocol is preferred just because of the performance and the consistency, right? Because Lustre has fully cache coherent locking, and NFS is only close to open consistency. So, like I was mentioning earlier, improved multi-tenant control and fine-grained access. A lot of that work has been done in the 217 release already, so we can fully virtualize, clients, and the clients are mounted and they're strongly authenticated with, secure crypto, and just improving the ease of configuration of multi-tenancy. And to further that goal, having simplifying the configuration. Lustre does have quality of service mechanisms, but making that easier to use. Right? There's a number of areas that Lustre has been around a long time. Started off command line, but people want one-click cloud deployment. Right? And that's, a lot of the cloud vendors provide functionality like that, but up-leveling the level of integration and flexibility is going to be one of our targets. And I think that's it.
Yeah, that was our slides. So just happy to
Questions,
take
yeah.
general questions.
So how are you monetizing again? How are you making money? You were mentioning that at the beginning, that
So
Lustre is free.
yeah, so it is, the license is free to use it, but then the way you make money is by service, right?
Support
So
service, yeah.
yeah, so that could be support, could be training, could be actually developing features, or those are the performance tuning. Again, that's another sort of servicey thing, but these are all like particular categories.
And you're already getting people winning these? I mean, you said you're
Every
still
one of
very young.
those we've had at least one inquiry about, right? And some we've actually got active contracts for.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, like we said at the beginning, Lustre's kind of a reverse startup where we have an old product and a new company, and so because we're well established in the market, people know Lustre and they trust that we're able to deliver, and
You're
so
good
it's actually been-
custodians.
yeah, and so we actually have a good flow of contacts, people coming to us. We don't have to advertise.
Decades
right?
of experience.
Yeah, centuries.
Centuries, yeah.
You make me feel really good, man.
Yeah.
I have a question, let's say, about the ecosystem. Supposedly the big corporations that are selling and operating the cloud offers the whole packet you see to make everything with the cloud. So there are another companies like yours that are offering to improve that usage, to make it more performant. And my question is this because the biggest corporation that are operating and making the cloud are only going to the big chunk of the pie and are letting behind a lot of loose ends? That they are more simple than.
I think it's like they're looking at Lustre, or how Lustre fits as part of their solution, and the bits they need and the bits they maybe adjust that's relevant to them. But that's not the same thing as zooming out and looking at the big picture, right? Of everything across all of Lustre, across all users. Everyone has their own areas of particular interest, and it makes sense to everyone. This is why their development investment, they'll get back more than they put in, because other people are doing other things that are useful to them, and there's certain core that everyone needs, right? You need to sort of stay current with the most recent Linux distributions or whatever, right? Everyone needs that, but there's some things that classes of users need, and some things that maybe only Amazon, for example.
They have Amazon has
their own
has an
network.
EFA network adapter, and so they have a dedicated network driver for their internal network, and nobody else is going to be using
Right.
that.
And similarly-
But that's still going into the core Lustre code, so that when a consumer rents an AWS VM, they can install a version of Lustre that has the EFA network interface, right, without having to coordinate with Amazon to do
And
that.
that's, similarly, over the years, we've had other organizations like Google or Cray do the same thing with their own,
But I think, one of the important things is that, even though the big players are all having their own first-party Lustre, right? Their customers are asking for different things, fine-grained access control or multi-vendor, like a multi-tenancy inside a single cloud instance, right? Which they can't provide, but Lustre can provide isolation between departments, or users with sensitive medical data can isolate even within a single cloud deployment. And so there's still, work, always new things to be done. When we started Lustre, we thought, stick everything together and make it big. And now, it's changed. I wouldn't have thought that multi-tenancy would be a core feature, but each of the cloud vendors still wants new development. And, we're, one of the, best placed organizations to provide, consulting in that area.
Right.
So, any final messages for the viewers and the readers? Like a closing statement,
Closing statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we'd just like to, clear things up that, I did actually have a call this morning from a former colleague who had heard a rumor that, DDN had, sold off its Lustre development team, and Lustre was dead. And so they needed everyone should switch to some different technology, and just to assure people that's absolutely not the case. And so, we'd totally be open to working with DDN. DDN has remains to have a big Lustre team. So,
yeah, I think the important thing is that, we're here to increase the size of the pie and not take away part of the pie from other people,
Yeah.
right? We want to ensure that Lustre continues to be, the choice of the large systems going forward, right? And not slowly fade away, because there's lots of organizations, universities, laboratories, weather, all of those things that are not AI, right? And so I think people sometimes lose sight of, all of the things that live in the computer world that aren't AI today. And it's not to say, Lustre works very well in AI too. I'm not saying that's not the case, but there are other people in the world too.
Yeah. Well, with the TLC that you guys are giving to Lustre, it's going to be the large cluster of the future.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you very much.